coffee, big cup, and hello. Welcome to another episode of the Gilmore Way Podcast. I can't believe we've already made it to the end of season 3. This is such a great season, one of my favorites. I think it's like my second favorite next to season 4. And so tonight we're going to take a look back on all the best and worst moments.
Yep. Before we get started, just please remember to do all those YouTube things for us. Please like this video, subscribe to our channel, share it with your friends. And if you're watching this and you have any thoughts on season 3, drop us a comment and let us know where you stand on anything and everything.
Indeed. All right, let's jump right on into this. We don't have any synopses this week, so let's just chat about the season. What do you think are some of the best episodes?
I have to give top billing to They Shoot Gilmore's. Not even just from an acting perspective and a writing perspective, but I love the costuming. I love the use of color within the sets. I will give a special shout out to Sean Gunn for what he did with Kirk in this episode, because it was just so joyous to see him be so passive aggressively threatening to Lorelai and see their competition and knowing that they both wanted to win the dance competition. But I love how all of that fun is existing in this minefield of a triangle with Rory and Dean and Jess at this point, and how all of that is coming to a head amidst this really just fun town event. I love Taylor and Miss Patty with trying to like steal the megaphone issue, seeing the situation with Suki and Jackson and them confronting Lorelai about don't get involved in the 4 and 4 thing. Babette and Maury dancing for 3 minutes and then just being like, I think I'm done. And he's just like, okay, let's go. There's so much good about it. There's so much that's fun about it, even though it can get plot heavy. But I loved the camera work. I especially loved the use of color within the costumes and the dance scene. And the whole marathon scene. There was just so much good about it that I don't even think I could pinpoint one thing that I don't like, so that would take the number 1 spot for me.
Yeah, I think it's overall one of the strongest episodes of the entire series, especially from a production standpoint. Just, you're right, absolutely everything is on point. Like, there's so much character drama squished into 40 minutes, and it's all taking place and just one of the most quintessentially Stars Hollow things to ever happen. And, Kenny Ortega did a fabulous job with all the moving parts and the choreography and, like I said, costumes, hair, makeup, all of it just pitch perfect. And it's also a pivotal moment for several major relationships. So I do love it, but I don't know that it takes my top spot. Just from like a pure, like, my comfort episode kind of perspective. One of my favorites, and this might be like a sleeper hit, maybe a controversial opinion. I'm a huge fan of Let the Games Begin. Again, because I'm a nerd. I love a good college campus. I love a good college visit. We've been to Yale. So I feel like I can, imagine what their day there was like. And just every time I go back to Vancouver, I go back to UBC because that's my happy place. The Irving K. Barber at UBC is my happy place. And so Rory's first time at Yale just triggers warm, fuzzy feelings about my own university experience. And it too has a lot of great character drama, but it's really just focused on the Gilmores until the end when you get that first kiss as a couple with Rory and Jess. It just like XTC's Then She Appeared comes on. Oh, it's so good. Like, I love that song. I love that moment. There's so much chemistry there for them. And just the family dynamics of Richard trying to pull a fast one on them with the college interview. And I love him talking about his time at Yale and trying to bond with Rory over this. It's just one that, like, if I only have time to watch a couple episodes, like, this is kind of one of the ones I always gravitate toward.
Do you have a number 2 or a number 3 or any honorable mentions from this season?
Ooh, Those Are Strings Pinocchio is probably another honorable mention. So again, sorry if you can hear noise. The geriatric cat is at her scratching post next to me right now. Hi, Lily. She's sweet. Sometimes. Sometimes she's a heinous bitch, but I still love her for it. I love how she picks this moment to be like, you know what? I rarely go to the scratching post, and this is it. Earlier today, I was sitting in a chair, and she was like trying to get up on it, and I stood up to like assist her or let her like cross over it, and she just sat down and took my spot.
Well, cats. It was probably always hers to begin with in her mind, so that's cats for you folks.
That's her afternoon nap spot. It's like her number 3 spot in the living room, so I was in her way. Anyways, she's, you know, in human years, she's like 84 years old, so we defer to her. But anyway, point being, those are strings Pinocchio. Just Rory's graduation. Again, I just have so many nostalgic feelings for my own time at school. I'm wearing my like Shelton shirt, so felt fitting now that Rory's graduating to wear this one. And just I'm such a sucker for a hat toss moment. I don't know why, I just am. So watching Rory graduate and Lorelai and Suki get the in and Luke blubbering. All of these moments are...
I'm blubbering. You guys are freaks.
Yeah, it's a great finale. So I think we're going to talk a little more about the finale in a bit, but like that, I'm trying to think, are there others? Oh, Big One. Huge fan of Big One. Again, I'm a big sucker for the academic plot lines in the show. And so the yes day. Okay, now Lily is screaming. Sorry. She's singing the song of her people for us right now. She's like, the pod must hear this.
It's okay. We stand Lily.
Yeah. I mean, other than the like gross sex politics part of Paris thinking that having sex with Jamie torpedoed her chances of getting into Harvard, the rest of it is so good. Just like the anticipation of like who's getting in where and what's happening. The humor of Kirk being the town mailman and not sorting the mail first. Just it's excellent. I love that one. So those are some of my faves. What about you? Do you have any more?
Yep. I also really always enjoy A Tale of Pose and Fire. I loved seeing how these weird, that's not the right word, eclectic people, just who have this interest in Edgar Allan Poe just come together. Unfortunately, we see that the inn has experienced a fire. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna...
You're still hearing Lily screaming, aren't you?
And you know what? Like, the folks are going to enjoy the cat screams. So
this is how we roll here.
Welcome to season 3 wrap up, folks, featuring Lily.
We are professionals, but Lily is not. At least it's not 3 a.m. She likes to do this at 3 a.m. a lot, and it's a lot less fun then.
Yep. But yeah, I did enjoy that. I liked seeing how Lorelai and Suki encounter just this really unexpected travesty that's happened. I love seeing moments like this, and it's not the first time that it happens when the town comes together to try and just collectively be there for one another. And you have so many of the townsfolk putting up these guests who are now displaced. Another standout for me from that episode is just seeing Rory go to bat for her best friend and show up and just be like, listen, I know you're going through a really tough time right now. She doesn't invalidate her experience or, dismiss what she has going on, because that college rejection is brutal. That's everything Paris had wanted in life. But she goes above and beyond to be there for her as a friend and show up and say, like, listen, I'm not going to let you flounder in this way. Open up the mailbox, take a look at all of the other letters and all of the other schools who want to be a part of the Paris Geller business experience. Finish watching your soap if you want to finish watching this episode. But then, get back to life and get back to Jamie and tell him and your parents what's going on, and let me as your friend and the other people in your life that are there care about you and be there for you. And I think that was the wake-up call that Paris really needed, and she's able to rebound because of that. So I really enjoyed that moment. And then I just lastly love seeing Rory go back into her room and all of the Yale decor that's now in place as opposed to the Harvard decor. And I know we've talked about this previously, how it was seemingly improbable for that to happen so quickly and as instantaneously as it did. But you combine it with, the music that's playing at the time, and it just pulls at the heartstrings for me because it's, you know, Lorelai accepting that this is going to be Rory's path now. This is the school that she's going to want to attend. She's giving her approval, her 2 thumbs up, and letting Rory know that this decision that you're making is okay by me. I support it, even though I was giving you grief about it before. And I think that was sort of the validation that Rory didn't need, but was just helpful for her in that moment. And it just propels her into season 4 and the Yale experience that we're now going to see her have.
Yeah, I also love that episode for all the reasons you just listed. The, you know, do not mock the scientificity of our pro-con lists. You know, I'm a big proponent. I am pro-con lists. I use them a lot. And so I love kind of seeing them debating the merits of these places and ultimately coming to that decision. And speaking of tugging at the heartstrings and cats, Papaya makes her one and only appearance.
Yeah.
And I can't handle it in media when like cats get like when stuff happens to cats, like in Breakfast at Tiffany's, when she's like in the car and she tells Kat to get out and she's like, go, you don't belong to me, you know. And then she realizes the error of her ways and goes out into the rain and goes looking for him. Like, I don't care if you kiss the guy. I want to know if you find the cat. And so to like see Papaya at the end all covered in soot and just like this like poor homeless cat who you guys took in, and like I'm so glad that she didn't get hurt in the fire. And Lorelai just picks her up and is like, oh my gosh, I can't with that moment. But yeah, I love that one. I think season 3 overall is very strong for Stars Hollow. It comes out swinging with the end of Summer Madness Festival. And then you get the dance marathon. You get all the Thanksgivings. You get the winter carnival. You get the inn fire happening. You get everyone rallying around Rory for her her high school graduation. Like, it's just, you know, Stars Hollow is such an important character and such a beloved thing in this fandom. And it really shines in season 3. And I think that's sort of like a common thread of everything we just talked about is, And like season 3 is such a wrap up of sorts. It's sort of an end of an era, and they handle it really well for the most part. So you get some really strong threads running through in terms of, you know, the excellent Connecticut vibes, but also like real character progress.
Yeah. And we'll get to some of our favorite and least favorite arcs, but before we jump into that, are there any episodes from this season that you didn't like or just, you know, rank at the bottom for you?
Yes. One of my least favorites of the entire series happens, and I don't know why. And I'm like, I don't even know so much if it's something wrong with it or if I just hate it because it's boring. But one I almost always completely skip over is 8 o'clock at the Oasis. The only good thing about that episode to me is wet Milo Ventimiglia. Like, it's boring. It's useless filler. It doesn't progress anything. And it really just retreads old ground with Emily and Richard's inappropriate involvement in Lorelai's dating life. So it's one of those things where if you cut it from the season, nothing would change. And to me, that's a mark of like not a great episode.
I agree. I too tend to bypass that one a lot of the time for a lot of the same reasons that you said. I also, I feel like a lot of people like this one, but it still just doesn't do it for me. I don't really care so much for Swan Song. I feel like it was also just very much like I'm bored watching it. It's kind of just like an hour to be an hour. I think the only part of that episode that I genuinely enjoy, but I do chuckle at it immensely when we get around to it, is the boat scene when Luke and Jess go out onto the lake to find the swan because, you know, Jess wants to beak him back. So they depart the diner, they go out, and then the swan actually shows up. And it always just plays out to me as this like fun sports audio commentary where they're just like, oh, there it is, but it's not going to come our way because it probably knows it's outnumbered. Look at it going away. That thing could probably murder you in its sleep if it wants to, but it's departing right now. It'll probably go and get one of its friends and come back. Like, that whole exchange always makes me smile and it makes me laugh. But other than that, that episode it's just boring. I just feel like I watch it to get through it so that it can take me on to the next one. But there's nothing really else substantial that I felt comes out of that one from a plot point.
Yeah, it's a bit of a snooze fest, honestly.
Yeah.
I also don't love that one. Another one I don't really like, and actually I have more actual gripes with this one than I do with 8 o'clock at the Oasis for some reason, but I enjoy watching it more, is One's Got Class and the Other One Dies.
Mm-hmm.
It's another one that doesn't really progress the plot. Lane almost has this great character moment, but reverts to her black-haired self. Like, she's so close to expressing herself and, you know, and taking a stand and making a statement to her mother. But then she just chickens out. And, like, we start back at square one with her just being like, no, I can't do this. It'll kill her. And another problem I have with it is that it rehashes the whole teen mom thing. And it's like the worst instance of mom shaming we see on the show. And for a show that's generally sympathetic to this single teen mom, this episode really is just like, well, you're flaunting your mistakes. And like, it was refreshing to see a show that didn't shame Lorelai for her decision to be a mom at 16. But this, to come in season 3 and to sort of like backtrack on that and start like having people express such negative opinions towards her felt really unnecessary. It's just like, why are we doing this to her now? If we want to make this out to be a strong, independent decision, why do we have to have a gang of Karens attack her verbally? Like, it feels backwards. And Lorelai is insufferable in this episode. She does too many bits and too many voices. She mocks Luke at the high school and is like, oh, don't walk away, Butch. Well, if I thought you didn't care, I'd die. Oh, I'd just die. And I'm like, really? Yeah. And, you know, Luke is only there because she was pushy with him. He didn't want to do it. He didn't like high school. He even says to her, like, how would you like to go back to your high school and give a talk? And, you know, that would be a horrifying prospect for Lorelai. And yet she's just like, nah, I'm going to just steamroll over your feelings. And I don't really care you're doing this. Mm-hmm. And there's no empathy from her. There's no like, okay, you make a good point. Fine. I don't know. It's just, and speaking of the gang of Karens, she puts them down. She's like, I couldn't pick this woman out of a lineup. She's too much of like a not like other girls in this episode where, you know, she's just like, oh, Deb, how's Kathy doing? And then she like doesn't even listen to her. She just talks to Rory. I don't know. It's just, oh, Rory condescending with Shane. Yep. Yet another not like other girls moment. It's just really gross. I don't like most of what happens on that episode. It's one of those things where like I never really hated it, but I recently rewatched it and I was like, well, that's problematic and that's problematic and I don't like that and that's boring and why?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's collectively also something that I don't love from this season. It's not episode specific, but anytime that Lorelai and Nicole, but even more specifically Rory and Shane, are just being petty AF with one another, I don't care that you're teenage girls and that's like, you know, how you behave sometimes. Like, just don't do it. And anytime that they're doing that and they're just passive aggressively trying to one up each other and just weirdly mark their boyfriend territory, please don't, like, and let's just move on from that immature behavior. I can't stand to see it.
Mm-hmm. And like, there's a little bit of that with, well, it's not as bad with Luke, but in Lorelai Out of Water, you sort of get a little bit of that like petty jealousy starting to like bubble up a little bit, where Luke's like, why didn't you tell me that you were going fishing with a guy? And like, and then when he sees that Lorelai's going out with someone is when he asks out Nicole. Like, I don't hate Lorelai Out of Water, but again, I find that one kind of boring. Alex isn't too bad, but we talked about him in our Bad Boyfriends episode. There's not enough of him to like really truly care about him. And so some of these episodes with him just feel like a drag, knowing that it goes nowhere.
Yep.
Any other ones you hate? Or like have major critiques for?
Not really. I would say it's predominantly those two. Everything else for me, even if I didn't love it, I at least like it and enjoy it. And I'm not just like skipping it or being like, oh, this is so boring and I just want to watch this 45 minutes and get through it. Everything else in season 3 did it for me. And I feel like it tracks because I feel like 3, 4, 5, as we get into these middle seasons, that's when this show really is at its best and shines anyway. So,
yeah. I've got one more that I want to like critique. And this was like a bit of a surprise to me. I was rewatching it the other day and I was like, this episode's kind of terrible. Like, not the episode itself or not the writing or anything like that necessarily, but like what happens in the episode, what the characters do is terrible.
Yeah. I know where you're going.
And this, again, might be a hot take, might be a little controversial. Say goodnight, Gracie.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I love the Dave and Mrs. Kim and Lane stuff. And that's another great thing about They Shoot Gilmore's is Dave and Lane and their progress in that episode. Taking it back to that. But like their part of this episode is wonderful. But and the Jimmy and Jess stuff is actually pretty good. I quite enjoy Jimmy showing up, which we talked about Jimmy more last week. If you haven't seen our episode on fatherhood, go back and watch that. But what gets me is Lorelai and Suki, they have some complex mixed feelings about it, but they're a little too happy that Fran is dead.
Yeah.
And they are indelicate, to say the least, at her funeral. And they are like walking through town with her casket, trying to talk to the lawyer in charge of her estate to make sure they get the dragonfly. It's just really tactless and uncomfortable to watch. And it's played for laughs. And Melissa's real life husband is the lawyer. And yeah, it's just, it's taken way too lightly that there's this entire character who's been here for 3 years, who has been nothing but a sweet, loving person, whose death is used as a plot point and a way for 2 other characters to progress. What I wish had happened, and we're going to talk more about like things we think the writers could have done better, but I'm just going to mention it here because it's pertinent. I wish that maybe they hadn't had Fran die, but they made it so that after the Independence burned, that Fran saw the impact on them and was like, you know I said that I wanted to keep this in my family forever until I die, but this town needs another inn and it needs you guys running it. And I want you to have the dragonfly. I want you to restore it to its glory. And I would love to see you running it. Like, to have her sort of have a change of heart and have a beautiful moment between them, instead of having Lorelai and Suki be like awful human beings and like barely having any remorse about it because they're like way more excited about their future prospects than the fact that like this beloved townie has passed away. Like that's just gross. So there's the Lorelai and Suki of it all that sucks. And then on the other side, we have Rory and Jess not talking and being idiots, but also Dean proposing to Lindsay. And we talked about this in our proposal episode, but Dean is an idiot. Proposing to Lindsay was a bad idea. It was probably a Band-Aid solution to the fight that happened at the party. Lindsay was probably not pleased that he tried to white knight for his ex. So there's that. And then Rory is just super judgmental about it. And I mean, in a way, I get it because she was right. They shouldn't be getting married at 18 when they've only been dating a few months. There's absolutely no reason to rush that step in this relationship. So, but the way that she approached him about it and made him feel terrible and was like, what about school? Like, you should be doing this. It's like, you're not his girlfriend anymore. You don't have this much of a say. Like, chill out, back off, stay out of it. And then, yeah, Dean's not super nice to her when she's not super nice to him, which I guess is kind of warranted. And then he sort of gaslights her a little bit by saying, like, when you broke up with me for that jerk, when he was the one, like, he's rewriting history in his brain to like guilt her and make her feel bad in this moment a little bit. And so, you know, he was the one who very publicly dumped her at the dance marathon. And as warranted as that was, she didn't dump him. He was the one who took the step. Yeah. Whether that was, like, again, don't blame him for doing that. But don't rewrite history and throw it back at her in this moment as a way to hurt her just because she's not reacting to your insane news the way you wanted her to. I don't know. I gotta stop complaining about this episode. But like, it's funny because it is kind of fun to watch. Like, there are some good moments, and it's not terrible, and the writing is quite good. Most of the jokes do land, but just the immature stuff from Suki and Lorelai and the unnecessary drama with Dean, those parts don't do it for me.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's all a fair critique, and it doesn't matter sometimes if these critiques need to be going a little bit longer. If we don't like stuff, we need to call it out. As much as we love this show, it's not perfect. And sometimes we just need to be honest about that and say, like, this is problematic. This was not done well. This was not done right. Lily is obviously very much in agreement with us on how much sometimes this show just misses the mark. But going back to maybe talking about something that we do enjoy, I want to kick this off now, leading us into some of our favorite moments, not just episodes from this season, but some of our favorite moments. And I will start things off with saying that one of my favorite moments that I always love is just Rory's graduation and that entire speech. I love even the lead up to it, just with Jackson and Luke being like, oh, look at the architecture. I wonder what it takes to like insure this place. And having Lorelai and Suki be like, are they really just talking about that right now? And he's like, oh, I bet it's 6 figures. But then leading into Brad's song.
Bong, 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 bong. Oh, Brad.
Oh, Brad.
I love that. Adam Miley was genius. Apparently that was an ad lib. It's like one of the few ad libs that ever made it into the show.
Yeah. Well done, Brad. That always just cracks me up, and is just, Brad was, living his best life and just being himself in that moment, and I'm here for it. And I will say, I love Rory's entire graduation speech, acknowledging the writers that have impacted her life. And obviously she was going to talk about Lorelai because that's the person that has done the most for her life and impacted her the most. But I specifically love most about that speech how she highlights Emily and Richard and, calls them out as the pillars on which she stands and could not be anything and do anything without. And I love seeing how much that touches Emily and Richard in that moment, because they still are only really 2 years into being an active part of their granddaughter's lives. I'm sure they maybe still had their doubts about, their involvement and how much she cared or, not. And that was kind of, I think, her way of saying, I really love you and appreciate you and for everything that you've done in my life for the past 2 years. And it was just really heartwarming to see the looks on their faces when they were acknowledged in that speech, not knowing or thinking that they probably would be. And then just getting to her, own little love letter to her mom and about how she's been everything for her. And then the waterworks that it just leads everyone to have, including Luke. That's one of my favorite moments from this season for sure.
I'm of two minds about that because I do love the graduation scene and I love the responses of the family members that she's talking about as she's doing this. But also that speech is kind of, it's like a bad speech. It's not even a good speech. I think we're tricked into thinking it's good because it's so emotional and we're just like, oh my God, that's so sweet. But like structurally, why is she saying this in front of her entire graduating class and her headmaster? Like, this is not the moment for this. Or maybe like give them a shout out at the end. Don't be like, just throwing praise at your family when you should be talking about your education and Chilton and your classmates and your time there. I do like the line about the books at the beginning, like I live in two worlds. One is a world of books. I have a sticker of that on my laptop, like brilliant, love it. But Rory's choices of authors and all those things that kind of go into that moment it's just like, it's all just white American men. Like, why are you not shouting? Like, why are you not shouting out anyone else or anyone better? Like, come on. We'll talk about it a little more in depth when we get to our episode on graduations, but it's a mixed bag for me. if I were valedictorian at a place like Chilton, that would not be the direction I would take my speech. It's a little too personal when it's like I was valedictorian in grade 8. I had to write a speech like that. I mean, and I was only 14 and had to try to navigate that. And I feel like I did a better job at 14 than Marie did, because I actually like appealed to my classmates and not just my mom and my grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. But one of my favorite moments is in episode 1, when Suki wants to redecorate the house to be more masculine to make Jackson feel more comfortable. And so she paints the place blue and gets a bunch of antiques, including this giant bear. And he's like, what were you thinking? And she's like, I wanted you to be comfortable. Like, it's masculine. And he's like, it's terrifying. I'm going to get up in the middle of the night and try to like find the bathroom, roll over and play dead. He's just so and he's not wrong. It's too much stuff. I do like the shade of blue she picked, though. I think they should have kept that. I think they went back to the pink. I'm like, why would you repaint again? The blue is nice. But just the whole thing. And then like Lorelai and Marie hearing it and like peeking in and be like, what's happening right now? And the trout for over the mantelpiece, the whole interaction with Mrs. Kim where Lorelai tries to pay her $10 not to sell that to Suki.
Mm-hmm.
I love that bit. Just brilliant. Yeah.
I have like a character and their moments from this episode too that I also want to highlight, and I think you are in agreement on this as well. But collectively, I love all of the efforts that we see Dave make to try and just really win over Mrs. Kim so that he can be with Lane. I'll start off by saying I love what he really cleverly and subtly does at the dance marathon when he goes up to the sandwich table and he's just like, oh, so my parents are at Bible study. They'll get out in like 15 minutes. Will you still be serving sandwiches? So if I come back in 20 minutes and the sandwiches are gone, but you'll still be here. And you slowly, like at the mention of like Bible study and church, you just see Mrs. Kim just being like, oh yes, tell them to come back. Like, you know, he looks hungry. I like this boy. Well done, Dave. Not outrightly, you know, saying, I want to go out on a date with Lane. He's just keeping his cool, you know, doing what he needs to do to try and make that happen. But it was just so clever. And I love his efforts because he could, you know, see Lane and say like, you know, oh, it's just going to be too impossible to make it work and not try. But he does. And I love that about him.
Yeah. And you know, another one on my list is obviously his speech to her in Say Goodnight Gracie when he's like, you know, I only watch 30 minutes of television a day. I don't drink soda. You know, like the bubbles freak me out. You know,
yep.
I like singing these hymns.
Yeah. And then even like coming back and just saying like, I read the Bible, the entire Bible in one night just to try and find this. Like, please tell me I can't. And Mrs. Kim's like, oh, you know, it's just this. And she's like, you know, I like jokes too.
Yeah, it's Shakespeare, Henry VI. I like to goof off now and again too, you know.
Yeah. But just her admiration too of being like, you know, oh, reading the Bible in one night. You know, I've only done that like, you know, a handful of times in my life. Yeah. It's just
you need great determination and excellent lighting.
Yeah, it's so nice to see him making those efforts, which, you know, then at the end of the day pay off with Mrs. Kim allowing him to take Lane to prom. So he had to put in some work, but I appreciate that about him because it just shows how much he cared about Lane.
Yeah, Dave was such a light in season 3, and it, like, you know, good for Adam Brody to get the OC, which is a pretty solid show in itself. But like, I think the show suffered for a lack of Dave Rogalski.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Happy for Adam Brody, sad for us.
Yeah, exactly. What could have been? All right, what about your least favorite moments?
Ooh, pretty much the entire party scene in Keg Max with, I'll start off with like, as much as I'm Team Jess, I will throw him under the bus all day, every day right now for pressuring Rory for sex like that. No, it's never okay. I don't care what you have going on. It was obviously, he was just trying, I think, to use that closeness as like a response to how he was feeling in his life and the troubles that he was having. But even when she instantaneously felt uncomfortable and was wanting to say no and was very clearly not ready to take that step yet, you know, he kept on trying to push her into making that decision and going that route until she has to like knee jerk off the bed and say like no, and then runs down the stairs upset. I hate that entire scene for obvious reasons. But I also hate the response that Dean then has when he sees Rory coming down and him getting into that fight with Jess. That physical altercation was absolutely also not okay. There were so many better ways to handle it in terms of, you know, maybe trying to like converse or even verbally say like, you know, you need to leave her alone. That's not okay. Handle it better. You know, maybe even bring other people into the scenario in terms of like, you know, involving Lorelai if Rory's that upset and she just needs to go home. But starting a fist fight at a party and then having property damage result from it and the police being called, just grow up, you guys. I hated seeing all of it because it was just so juvenile and unnecessary.
Yeah, that was on my list too. And I do have it on like one of our later prompts, so I will talk more about it then with my more specific critiques. And we'll also probably touch on it a little more next week when we do our Jess breakdown as well. We'll like get into the meat of the scene a little bit. But yeah, absolutely just one of the most uncomfortable things about the season to watch. Just extremely unfortunate and kind of poorly handled. And, you know, my other least favorite moment also has to do with inappropriate comments about sex, which is Paris blurting out that she had sex but isn't going to Harvard on C-SPAN. Just sort of like, Paris, I know she's in a bit of a downward spiral, but she's normally such a composed and controlled person. And the fact that she was so emotionally distraught at the thought of like being a slut that she completely lost it and made that kind of admission, not only in public, but on like broadcast television. It's just like, oh, it's so uncomfortable to portray a girl feeling that kind of way about her sexuality. You know, she's been with Jamie several months. She trusts him. She loves him. It should have been a positive experience for her. And they just turn it into a punchline of like her equating not getting into Harvard with that. And, you know, part of me loves watching that scene and part of me hates it. The more you watch the show with a critical eye, the more you notice just their inappropriate use of words like slut and skank and terms for sex workers, where they just are constantly talking flippantly about that kind of stuff. And I don't like the sort of nonchalant, like removal of agency from women. And like why can't, you know, sexual intimacy and sexual pleasure be a good thing for anyone? Why is sex always a punishment? And along with that too, when Paris is telling Rory about her experience with Jamie and she's having trouble processing it emotionally, again, because she doesn't have like a great support network and it's just like overwhelming to her. And she doesn't know how to feel about it because again, she's been given all these, or she's been fed all of these narratives about having sex making you a slut. And Lorelai overhears their conversation and is like, I've got the good kid, which is, ugh. And even Lauren Graham fought against that line, and she kind of maybe tried to make it sound like I have the good kid because she's supportive of her friend, but everybody knows what that line was actually about. And nobody ever read it that way. It was always about like, Rory is a perfect angel child because she's virginal. And we're going to talk about this in more depth in the future as well. I keep saying that. Like, y'all want depth, stick around because we will get into all of these things in more detail in the future. But yeah, I don't like the attitude they take toward consensual intimacy being a terrible thing. Because then in the next episode, or a few episodes later, we have the less than consensual intimacy. And that's not done well either. And I wish that teen shows were more delicate about this, especially like at that time. This was when I was coming up, I didn't watch this show when I was a teenager, but I was watching The OC and I was watching Gossip Girl and all these other things. And I'm like, man, this was probably not the best stuff for me to be consuming at such an impressionable age. And I'm sure there were a lot of people who took maybe some messed up ideas away from this.
I think that's a very accurate and fair and good warning and way to assess that. So well done. I concur with all of it. Let's move on to talking about maybe specific characters instead of moments or episodes now that we liked. Who do you think had the best character arc this season?
I gave my best character this season to Lane. This was like when she really started to come out of her shell. She started trying to assert herself and develop an identity separate from her family. She was trying to individuate, differentiate from her, like what her mom wanted her to be. She's discovering her identity. She's just discovered her, like the number one thing on her cosmic to-do list is to be a drummer. And she goes out and gets that for herself. And in the process, she gets a love interest that she deserves. Someone who cares for her and is willing to go the distance and partake in the subterfuge and do what it takes to be with Lane, no matter how difficult, unlike Henry in the past. So it's unfortunate to me that a lot of this gets backtracked later. But in season 3, she feels like a real standout.
Mm-hmm. I thought about this a lot too, but because I do like when we can have, not always the same answers because it encourages and facilitates more discussion. But I do also have to give this one to Lane. I really think, again, this is when we see her just coming out of her own skin and stepping outside of the boundaries and the box that, her mom has kind of put her in for her entire life. It's not necessarily about hiding the CDs under the floorboards anymore and needing to like be so secretive about your secret closet and that whole aspect of your life. And it's nothing that happens for her overnight in terms of she goes from 0 to 100 and just becomes this like, rebellious teenager that is just, her mother's instantly just like, get out. I don't know what has happened to you. And it is an overnight thing. She's taking slow but very important progressive steps to come into her own and to realize what she wants her life to look like and what she wants that to be for herself, how she wants to handle having relationships and how she wants to handle her interactions with boys, and realizing that just because this is what my mother wants for me, it doesn't need to be what I want to have for myself, nor should it be the path that I need to take. And I think she matures a lot too, because I see a lot of just calm and patience and resilience in her when things are not even necessarily always going her way. And she does have those setbacks, but she's able to just keep moving forward in the most level-headed way, especially when she does need to have those tricky conversations with her mom about their differences in opinion now that are coming more to light.
Yeah. It's interesting that we're actually on the same page with that one. I mean, it is, but it isn't.
Yeah. But what about our favorites? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think we're going in the same direction. What about the worst arcs this season?
This might surprise you, Jess, for me. I did not expect myself in thinking about or preparing for this episode to be as, I don't know, bashing on him or as critical of him as I have been, considering, again, I'm in the Team Jess camp. We see a lot of Jess this season, but just because we see a lot of him doesn't mean that he's growing in a positive way. And I absolutely think he is not. He is just making horrible decisions left and right, very poor choices that I think he even knows are the wrong ones to be making, but he makes them anyway. He's not taking his school and education seriously. He lies to Rory about it when she questions if he is still going full time, when she offers to help him because she sees that he might be struggling or just needing assistance in general from an emotional support from, a schooling standpoint support, maybe with some tutoring. He just waves her off and just says like, no, I can do it myself, when obviously you can't because you're having all of these problems. and all of these issues. He's being very unfair to Luke, someone who is just, again, doing his active best to try and help him and get him back on his feet, and he's not treating him well. He's really not treating anyone well in this season who he should be or admits to caring about. So from start to finish, I just see him having no growth and just becoming a more troubled and problematic person, which is not fully his fault, but he's not taking any responsibility for it or trying to make himself better. And I think that's the key. You need to be striving for that self-improvement, and he just doesn't do it whatsoever. He just continues to make a bad choice like after a bad choice, and just doesn't seem to care about the fact that he's digging his own grave and ruining his own life in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I can't disagree with any of what you just said. Season 3, Jess is a real mess of a human being. And you're right, it's not entirely his fault. He is very troubled. He's got a lot going on. In season 2, he comes in and he injects a breath of fresh air into the show, but he's more of a bit part, and he's kind of just there to get between Rory and Dean. But then now that they're together in this season, you really start to see sort of more of what he's like underneath. And it's not pretty, because it's one of those things where it's like, oh, you were really only doing that to get to her, weren't you? And it's just sort of unfortunate that she felt like a pawn in his game a little bit. And that his attitude was a little more like, I just kind of want to mess with Dean. Mm-hmm. It's a way to get to you. Completely immature. And you're right, he was digging his own grave with everything he was doing. And he's, just the way he treated Shane and that whole situation, and not really putting in as much effort with Rory, and only giving a shit when he was trying to one-up Dean or get in the way of her friendship with Dean. Not a good look. We'll talk about him more next week when we get into his character deep dive. But the reason I didn't give it to Jess in this particular instance is probably because he's always been kind of a troubled character. And so I gave mine to a character who has a lot of ups and downs. And season 3 in particular was a very down moment for her. And that's Paris. Because she starts out strong with going on that date with Jamie and getting a boyfriend. And like things are going really well for her. And she really likes him. He really likes her. She didn't think it was possible. And Jamie is great. I loved that for her. But then she lets secrecy about him ruin her relationship with Rory. She gets very paranoid, and Francie is able to get between them. And even though like people have seen her with Jamie and like it doesn't feel like a secret, she still blames Rory for blabbing and like betraying her to Francie when really Rory didn't do anything wrong. And she takes it to these extreme levels of trying to get Rory impeached from the student council. They end up in Charleston's office, and she loses her focus. She takes her eye off the prize in a very detrimental way when it comes to their friendship. Rory she's tried to be nothing but supportive of Paris, and she's the one who encourages her before her date with Jamie in the first place. And so the fact that she gets so paranoid and turns around on her and just tries to absolutely destroy her, it's really disappointing. And going back to the big one, just blaming sex for her failure to get into Harvard. It's a bad look for the character to be so hard on herself and to be so hard on anyone who has sex, apparently, which is just unfortunate. But I would also like to give a shout out to Lorelai for having a boring arc this season. She doesn't really go through anything major until the very end with the inn stuff, with the fire at the Independence and getting the dragonfly. She only dates Peyton and Alex, who both kind of turn out to be duds. And she even tries to call back to Max. Like, season 3 was a lot of advancement for Rory's plot with the college applications and all of her stuff with Paris. And Lorelai's arc was just like a snooze. Just it wasn't good. Season 4 is definitely more of Lorelai's season. So I'm really looking forward to talking about her more next season. But yeah, wasn't a huge fan of Lorelai this season.
Yeah. I agree, but I am also equally excited for season 4. It's my like favorite season, I will just say flat out. So I'm excited for us to get to that. Um, before we get to season 4, let's talk about the finale of season 3. What did you think of it?
I love it. I think it's one of the best season finales, probably after Raincoats and Recipes. Um, and like Bon Voyage is really great too, but that's also technically the series finale, which is a bit of a different beast. And so I kind of almost keep it in a different camp. And it's also not written by Amy and Dan, so it just feels like something unto itself, and it's still great. But as for like the main seasons, this one is really strong. It does a really good job of wrapping up arcs, but setting up things for the future. And it feels like if the show had ended here, it would have been satisfying. It doesn't really leave a ton of loose threads or any major cliffhangers, but it does still leave you hopeful for the future and wanting more and being really excited for both of our Gilmore girls and what's on the horizon for them in season 4.
Yeah, I agree. Not every season finale transitionally was well done in terms of taking us from the end of one into the beginning of the next. Season 1 and 2 specifically, I think that transition could have been done so much better and should have been done so much differently in terms of writing and plot and what takes you from one to the next. But we don't have that problem here, at least not in my mind. I think it just dots its I's, it crosses its T's. It really puts a good capper, like what you said, on what Rory and Lorelai have going on for right now. It acknowledges that the changes that are coming for them without spoiling them too much. And, it still leaves us wanting more and questioning, okay, we know what we need to know for right now. We know changes are on the horizon for these women. We don't know how they're going to respond to these changes or what's going to happen, but it intrigues me enough to where I go into season 4 just wanting to be like, well, tell me like what happened. I wasn't left hanging, but I still just want to like know now what's the next step for our women. So I just think it was really well done in that regard.
Yeah, it's a full circle moment unto itself. And it's really nice how we kind of start off season 1 with Rory starting at Chilton, and they come in and it's like a big scary building. And then the last scene of season 3 is them standing in the foyer being like, it's not so scary anymore, is it? Mm-hmm. And, it's just a perfect little capper on it. And it closes out the necessary arcs. It sort of has Rory having a little bit of closure with Jess by confronting him, even though he says nothing. And the Lorelai and Nicole Luke thing is a little more open, which is one of the few things that even resembles a cliffhanger in the season. Is kind of like, what's going to happen there? But, Lorelai, again, starts the series being like, if we're going to open our own inn someday, you need to stay alive long enough to do it. And then we have Lorelai and Suki at the graduation being like, we got the inn. Mm-hmm. So it just, seasons 1 to 3 could be their own thing. And I'm glad that they weren't all that we got because, seasons 4, 5, and 6 are also fabulous. Season 7, a little more hit and miss. But I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad I didn't end here, but it could have. And so the fact that they were able to so satisfyingly wrap up these parts of the arc, I'm like, good job. Well done. Love it. Yep. Well played. Graduations are fun. So just like all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with all of that. One of the, I think, second to last things that I want us to talk about, what, if anything, would you change about this season if you had the power to do so?
I would leave Max Medina the hell out of it.
Amen.
Why did he come back? He was even more useless than Alex. Like they teased us with the whole like, apparently I'm not over it thing, as if there was some chance that they would get back together and that would ever be a thing that worked out. And then they just pull the rug right back out from under us. They make Max into a sniveling excuse for a human being when he's like, 10 feet. I can't be anywhere near you. You're a mythical creature. I have no control around you. Like, you're a grown-ass man. Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And like Lorelai's just chasing him around a classroom. It's just so uncomfortable to watch and it's unnecessary. I think they got desperate when Billy Burke dipped out to go do something else. And they're like, well, we got to do something dramatic for Lorelai at the end of this and like make her question her relationship with Alex because we need an impetus for this to end. So let's bring back Scott Cohen. As much as I love Scott Cohen, this was just like, this was not it, man. There was no resolution to their breakup in the first place. We don't find out how it happened. There was no reckoning for Lorelai. She didn't seem to like really consider Max's feelings in this at all. There was no closure, and and there's even like an underhanded comment about like, well, life's not really about closure, is it? I think that was the writers being like, screw you, audience. Like, we're bringing it back and we're not giving you closure just because you asked for it, which feels juvenile. But like, if anyone deserved closure in the show, it was Max, and he never got it. And it just, was Lorelai being impulsive and stupid.
Yeah.
What about you?
I agree. I will say it kind of like, it goes hand in hand with like a love-hate thing. I want more Emily Burgle, but I want less Francie drama. Because I would love to see that character fleshed out more, but not be so combative or just mean girlsing it up with Paris and Rory, because I think Francie was just a really, really intriguing character. I think Emily did such a good job portraying her, but it didn't always have to be like this, let's just constantly try and scratch each other's eyes out and claw at each other's backs and like, I'm going to be the best and like this school is mine. I would have loved to see, I did love the devious side to her, because I feel like Emily played it off well, but I almost would have loved to see a resolution where maybe Paris comes to even see Emily as like an like on her level in terms of like the evil scale, or just like, oh, this girl, like she's good, like I like her. And then maybe just have her and Paris and Rory get along a little bit more, have some more interactions where they're actually doing more things for Chilton. So that's the change that I would have liked to see. More Emily as Francie, but less Francie BS sometimes.
Yes, less Francie as a villain.
Yeah.
Like, you're right. She's too antagonistic, but she's so funny. Like, some of the lines they gave her and some of the responses from Paris in reaction to her are just like some of the funniest writing of the whole season. But yeah, the drama feels really contrived and unnecessary. And yeah, this goes to what I said about Paris and Rory and how, Paris was smart enough to know exactly the kind of manipulations that Francie was trying to pull, and yet she still let this happen, and she tried to destroy her relationship with Rory over it for a dumb reason. So yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
So is there anything you think that the writers could have done better? Like is there anything else that strikes you as like, I wish this had been different?
Yeah, I mean, again, sometimes I think, and it goes hand in hand with what I just said. Sometimes I spend too much on one specific point or one specific thing that doesn't really matter so much. It's very inconsequential when I want to see more time given to other people or other things. For instance, I would have loved to have seen, like we already said, more of Lane and her personal growth this season. But when you're giving screen time to Francie, the Francie Paris Rory drama, like you're just taking away from it. And like, okay, you have one or two scenes where they're contentious and they're getting at each other, and that would have been fine. But it was just rehashed so often where I'm just like, I get it. These girls don't like each other. Show me something else. I think we see too much of it with like, the Dean and Jess and Shane and Lindsay and Rory and that whole triangle, pentagonal, whatever you want to call it. Like, yes, these people are all not going to like each other necessarily because emotional feelings are coming into play and relationships are ending, new ones are starting. But I think we harp a little bit too much on one character hating the other two unnecessarily, especially with Shane and Rory. You spend so much time on just dredging up all of these negative feelings that you're not giving us positivity enough to counteract it. And it kind of just feels like we're dredging through the mud when you do that to us.
Yeah, I agree. It's a little too melodramatic at times, and they beat a dead horse. Like the fact that it takes Rory and Dean 7 episodes to break up and for her to get together with Jess. It's like, oh, why are we just like rehashing all the jealousy and the like the pettiness over here? Like Rory should have just cut Dean loose in like episode 2 and then, you know, maybe had to deal with the Shane thing for a little bit. But Lorelai was totally right to call her out in the first episode of the season, being like, you are dragging his poor heart through the mud and you need to make a choice. And she picks him because she sees Shane and she doesn't feel like she can blow up her relationship and express herself to Jess now that she sees him with someone else. But Jess makes an excellent point in Haunted Lake where he's like, did you call me this summer? Did you write me any letters? Smoke signals, carrier pigeons? Like, you didn't try to contact me. What was I supposed to do? Sit around and wait for you like Dean would have? It was just too immature and dead horse, shall we say. Mine, like, again, I think something the writers could have handled better is the whole bedroom scene at the party. I wish they would have left sex out of it. I mean, obviously they were building towards it with Swan Song when Rory says to Jess, like, keep thinking what you're thinking. And she tells Lorelai, no, I might be thinking about it. So it might have been weird for them to like totally drop the subject after that because it felt like it was coming. But for them to kind of make Jess do something really out of character, and well, I don't even know if it's out of character necessarily, but it just was so wrong and so inconsiderate for him to try to push that on her at that moment. I wish they had a more respectful approach to it and more consideration for consent and not sort of jumbled up the whole, like, the moment of Jess's emotional upset and trying to drown his feelings in his intimacy with Rory. I wish they hadn't like jumbled that with the sort of emotional abuse that he heaps on her after that. And like, it makes this really difficult to parse scene. And we're like, what are we even watching here? What's happening? And then they just gloss right over it. And they have, you know, like almost a full episode before they have Rory even bring it up again to Lorelai and start to reckon with us and tell us how she feels about it. And I think that they could have had them have any other fight and it still could have ended in a fist fight with Dean, Rory coming down upset, and it's seeming like Jess tried to get fracture or whatever. But just the fact that they tried to make it, you know, edgy and tried to have him force himself on her a little bit, like it toes up to this line that shouldn't be crossed. And it's just not well done. The execution didn't land, and it's just really upsetting in the end how it all plays out. And I mean, granted, things like that happen in real life, I guess, but you know, if you're gonna have Rory be the perfect virginal character and you want to show respect for sex and for waiting for the right moment, like, do it right. Make that a conversation, make that like an actual thing instead of it just being like this giant blow up at a party. Like it feels wrong and sudden and poorly handled.
Yeah, I agree. And I will follow it up and close out that thought by saying Lorelai's response to it the following morning, you're also not doing your daughter or anyone any favors when you're condoning that behavior by finding out what happened, saying like, okay, there was a fight at a party. Rory, what happened? But oh, wait, you started the fight. You're the one that was the instigator of this that then led to all of this property damage and the cops being called and everything else that's happened. I think any normal parent rightly emphasis on that would just be like, excuse me, you're grounded. There's going to be some serious repercussions from this. But Lorelai just says, did you ever know that you're my hero? It's like you're sending your daughter the worst message in that moment. And you're sending anyone who's watching this show the worst message that your daughter's behavior and what she caused is okay.
Yeah, and I mean, granted, she didn't really cause it because it was this boiling tension between Dean and Jess, and she was trying to stop them. It was Dean overreacting and trying to step in when he shouldn't have. It was bad timing and bad decisions all around. So she didn't really cause it, and I think we're supposed to view it as a joke of like, you know, Rory being so desirable that these guys are fighting over her. Mm-hmm. But yeah, when you see like the state that house was in and you remember back to the end of the last episode, just the looks on everyone's faces and how horribly emotional all of that was, you're just like, it's kind of funny, but also kind of tasteless. And Lorelai, you should be maybe a little more concerned about this right now. Your daughter's boyfriend just got in a physical altercation with her ex-boyfriend. Like, maybe we should, in the words of Ray, a modicum of serious would be appreciated right now.
Like, excellent pull there. Well done.
Speaking of the words of Rory, why don't we close this out with like some of our favorite quotes?
Okay, let's do that. Just leave it on some fun and levity, and I'm here for that. I will start out by saying I appreciated this line because it's a personal phobia of mine. But the entire interaction where Dean comes over to pick up some of his personal effects and things after he and Rory have broke up, and Lorelai instantly just freaks out in the kitchen. You don't know what's going on, but then Dean comes in and says, "Could you get rid of it?" And we know that at this point it's a spider, and Dean's like, "Yeah." And Lorelai's like, "Don't let it see you. Spiders are vindictive. That was a really big spider. I think it had a gun."
It's the size of a Buick.
Yeah. And I get it. So,
yeah. I've seen this in action. I know what you're like with bugs. So yes, I get that.
Yeah. I will freak out even when it's not there, but I think that it is. So
yes, I've seen that in action too. I've even caused it myself. Yeah. Speaking of pests, one of my favorites is from Haunted Leg, where when they have a mouse in the inn, and Lorelai's like, "Did you call an exterminator?" And Michelle's like, "Why, no. What a wonderful idea. I was actually going to fasten a wedge of cheese to my head and lay on the ground until Mickey gets hungry and decides to crawl out and snack on my face." Mm-hmm. When does he get here? He said we're the first up. What do we do until then? Make cat sounds.
Yeah.
I just love that whole interaction. Just Michelle's like, until Mickey decides to crawl out and snack on my face.
What a visual.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Yep. Also, speaking of pests, the entire Hugger world.
Yes. Yeah, that was on my list.
They are trying to just do some spring cleaning and clear out some stuff. And I don't even I feel like I don't want to steal this from you because it's, you know, your home country. So if you want to take this one, I'll let you have it because I just feel bad saying it.
Yeah, I'm not throwing out Hugger World. I'm throwing out Hugger Canada. There's something living there besides Canadians.
Oh, no.
Yeah. That's such a good one.
Yep. There's also a lot of digs at Taylor this season, which I personally like. One of my favorite is when Luke just says, "Get out, Taylor." And Taylor's like, "Why?" And he's like, "Oh, it's just a code I live by."
Yes. On the Taylor note, I love him being like, when he's talking about kind of, I think he's doing the construction on the soda shop. And because he's, you know, the head of all these committees and whatnot, he's like, "If you have any problems with me, take them up with me." Like, that's a good one.
Yep. Slipping into pregnancy and childbirth, another one of my personal favorites is when Sherry is going into labor and we're all finding out about this. And we have that interaction with Lorelai and Rory. And she's just like, "Well, tell Sherry to keep her legs closed until I get there." And she's like, "Oh, does that work?" And she's like, "Nope, bye."
Yes. Oh, speaking of that episode, Rory, are you ordering from Amazon again? We're going to have to get your books their own house. Relatable. And then she picks up the box on the porch and she's like, "It's heavy. Must be our hopes and dreams for me." I thought she discarded those years ago.
Yep. Oh, that's a good one. What's next? I will also say Miss Patty and just that woman being like a constant thirst trap and also just being super thirsty on her own. But just the line where she's like, it's times like these that you realize what's truly important in your life. I'm so glad I had all that sex.
Yeah. Sometimes I'm like, she's our sex positive queen, and other times I'm like, no.
No, she can be real problematic with her thirst, and
Yeah.
I can fully admit that. I mean, I even think back to season 1 when she's like, "Oh, Rory, your male friend's really nice." It's like, Dean is 17. Stop it. No, right now. So, yeah, you can be thirsty, be appropriately thirsty. Thank you and good night.
Yes, please stop thirsting after minors. We can get on board when it's an adult, but not a teenage boy. Another Michelle one for me. I can't even remember which episode this comes from, but it's like Lorelai's asking him why he's being a snob. Oh, I think it's the one where they go to the course about opening your own inn at the learning center, and Lorelai's like, "Why are you being such a snob about this? You went to hotel school." And he's like, "I attended the école." God, this is so hard to say, and I took French up until university. I attended the École Hôtelière de Genève. Wow, that's got to make one hell of a sweatshirt.
Can you translate for me? What does that even mean?
École Hôtelière de Genève, the hotel school of Geneva.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just like it's long and it's a tongue twister. So like, even though I know some French and what this means, it's still hard to say.
Yep. Another one of my favorites is when Rory goes to, again, get Paris, off her ass and out of bed. And she's just like, open up your mail and see all of those other letters and all of those other schools that want to be in the Paris Geller business. And she's like, who wants to be in the Paris Geller business? What even is that?
Yeah, she's like, did you just say be in the Paris Geller business?
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of Paris, I love it when they're at a student council meeting and, Rory's trying to stick it to Francie by saying that they can't have the blood drive in the cafeteria, and Madeline can't stand the word blood, and so she's like got to cover her ears. And so when they're done talking about it, Paris is like, Louise, poke John Williams over there and tell her she can cut the score.
Yep. Oh, that's good. Another one for me is when they're waiting at the mailbox for the applications, and Kirk is sorting the mail, and they're effectively just like, do you think you could go any faster? You got a girl's future in there. And then they throw in like the Santa iteration.
Yeah. You got a girl's future in that sack of yours. Santa.
Santa.
Yes. I love in Lorelai Out of Water when they're getting the Korean bride ready, and Mrs. Kim busts in and they're all discombobulated, and Rory is like, oh, I fell off my chair. Oh, well, don't.
Yeah. A little ditzy, but it's okay. Another good one for me, coming to mind now, is when Rory's like, oh, I gotta go, but like, just call me if like anything comes up or if there's any news. And Lorelai's just like, I'm not gonna remember this correctly in terms of name order, but I think it's something like, oh, you mean if Michelle kills Babette, who kills Miss Patty, who kills themselves in this like this weird, bizarre murder, suicide, something. And Rory's like, yeah, kind of like amongst other things.
Yeah. Lorelai gives a lot of lists.
Yeah, that line was very much me in trying to recall it. Like, tell Dean to tell Hermione to tell Ron to tell Seamus to tell Harry that I'm mad at him.
Yeah. I think this one's gonna be my last one, but it's a long one. It's a doozy, and it's just
okay.
Again,
close this out because I don't have any more off the top of my head right now.
It's Dave's speech. A few weeks ago, you told me that Lane had a crush on me. Well, I have a crush on her too. Now, I know that you have very strict rules about dating and boys, but I just want you to know that I'm a good person. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I've never gotten a ticket. I'm healthy. I take care of myself. I floss. I never watch more than 30 minutes of television a night, partly because I think it's a waste of time and partly because there's nothing on. I respect my parents. I do well in school. I never play video games, in case they do someday prove that playing them can turn you into a serial killer. I don't drink coffee. I hate soda because the carbonation freaks me out. I'm happy to give up meat if you feel strongly about it. I don't mind wearing a tie. I enjoy playing those hymns on my guitar, and I really, really want to take your daughter to the prom.
Dave.
Just a gem of a human being. And like that speech is so perfect in every way, shape, and form. And I just, again, you mentioned it, but when he shows up disheveled from staying up all night reading the Bible, it's just the cutest. It's one of the highlights of Lane Kim's life, really, and of season 3 on the whole. So I feel like that's a fun place to close out.
Yeah, I agree. If you have any thoughts about season 3, anything that you disagree on from what we've just said, or if you have any additional thoughts that you want to add, drop us a comment below. We'd love to read them. You can also send us an email or find us on social media. We always include our links in the description below. Also, I'm going to continue to plug FanFest because if you're not going to this, you should be. It is a Gilmore Girls related weekend happening in Algonquin, Maine this fall. You can find tickets to that and a description of the event below. And it's also worth noting that we will be hosting a meme panel at that Gilmore Girls FanFest weekend. So if you love Gigi and you love memes, come out and come to our panel because we're planning that actively, and that's also going to be a really fun time.
If you've always wanted to play Gilmore's Against Humanity, now is your chance. So excited.
Yep. Aside from that, what have we got coming up next for us?
Well, I've already alluded to it a few times in this episode. Next week, we are diving deep into Jess Mariano.
I have thoughts.
We have so much to say about this guy, so that's inevitably going to be a fun discussion.
Yep. Come back for that. In the meantime, go back and watch some of our old videos if you want more GG content. And please remember again to do all of those YouTube things for us. Please like this video, subscribe to our channel. Just one click. It'll take you a couple seconds, and it really does help us out. In the meantime, have a good night. Keep drinking your coffee. And we will see you next Friday night for dinner.
Bye.
Bye.